All right, good evening, everyone. Okay, so this evening I wanted to just close off Learning Unit 5 and then see if we maybe touch on Learning Unit 6, but we're still well within our schedule according to our semester plan. If you're not sure of anything, please just give that a look under your in ARC, under your lecture information or lecture resources. There you'll find all of our recordings and, of course, a semester plan as well so that you can see where you're supposed to be at this point in the semester. Of course, you guys have received your assignment results back. I was very happy with those results and very impressed. So today I thought we'd just continue and close off our this learning unit before moving on to the next one. Okay, so we're looking at measuring GDP and economic growth. Okay, now in this scenario, we are looking at an economy that produces only three final goods. Okay, so we only produce solar panels, wheat, and delivery scooters. So the quantities produced and the prices in year one of course, so year one we assume to be the base year, and then year two are also going to be shown below. Let me just pull those through here. Okay, so here, oh goodness, that doesn't look very good. Let me just see if I can tabulate that for you guys quickly. Okay. See if this works. Not quite. Okay, it looks like I'm going to have to create this table. Okay, let's just insert a table here. Okay. Sometimes things will work, and sometimes they're just not gonna happen. Okay, so let me see if we can just make this make sense. Okay, solar panels. Okay, that's wheat. Okay, so essentially what we want to say is that in the first good that we produce, I'll do this, I'm going to do it individually. Okay, so the first good we produce is solar panels. Okay. Wheat and delivery scooters. We produce 500 solar panels, 40,000 bags of wheat, and 200 delivery scooters. Oh, that's worked out quite nicely. Okay. The price in year one is 3,000 Rand for the solar panel, 25 Rand for the bags of wheat, and each delivery scooter costs 18,000 Rand. Okay, that's the figure for year one. You guys can use those figures in the meantime if you want to just move ahead of me and calculate. Let me give you that student work area. What are we actually looking for here? Here's my question box. Okay, so we want to know in year one, what did we produce as a total nominal GDP? Okay, now to give you guys a bit of a hint, let's just pop this onto a little sticky note. Okay, nominal GDP is still your price times your quantity for the same year. Okay, so now this is for year one. Okay, and now I'm going to provide you with the year two figures while you calculate the nominal GDP for year one based on this formula and in this box provided. You guys do have the link, so feel free to fill it in while I continue here to give you the rest of this table. Okay, so it was just, okay, then we moved up. Okay, so now let me provide you with year two's figures. Okay, so then, okay, so we've got 3,600. This was 25 Rand in year one. Goodness, Nicole, I see you saying something, but I can't see your full message. Oh, no worries.
I'm right here. I'm tagged. Yeah.
That's perfect. No worries. Okay, so I just want to give you a practical example um, of how to actually measure GDP and economic growth so that you guys get some practice because this is going to be very similar to what you'll have to do in your assignment and of course in your tests and your exam, of course your exams. Okay, so then I'm just going to complete these figures for you. So here, this amount is now 18 Rand and up 28 Rand. 28 Rand, and the last one is 19,000. Okay, so this is our table. Okay, now what we want to work out, the first question we have is what is our nominal GDP for our first year? So now in practice, all we have to do to calculate this is say, we're going to take each product, okay, and we're going to look at how much we produced that year, and we're going to multiply it by the price. Okay, so what we're trying to work out here is how much did we produce as a country using nominal GDP? Okay, so this is very much like what I have seen in your assignment. Okay, obviously not too close because we don't want to violate any rules. But what you would do is you would say 500, the number of solar panels we produced in year one, multiplied by the price, which is 3,000. Then you would do exactly, of course, then you can even put in equals 15,000. Is that right? No, is it 150,000? Yes, I should have 5 zeros. Oh, goodness. Okay. That seems too much. Okay. Then we have our next calculation, which is wheat. And in our first year, we do exactly the same thing. We had 40,000 bags of wheat and we sold them at a price of 25 Rand. Okay, and then I apologize. My brain seems to still be stuck in Monday mode. It's not operating very efficiently. So I'm going to whip out a calculator here and cheat and say, oh, okay, yes, so then that might actually have been, okay, so this is 1 million Rand, okay, the other product then, of course, okay, and then of course scooters, okay, they operate at, okay, we only produce 200 of them, and we sell them at 18,000 Rand each. Okay, so that would obviously be 3.6. See how easy it is to get to 1 million. Just have to sell thousands of something or sell hundreds of something at 1,000 Rand, and then you can sort of get there. Okay, so this is 3,600. Okay, so in order to calculate our total nominal GDP, remember at this point, we're doing no inflation calculations. We are simply trying to see on a nominal basis. It's like when you get your salary, you don't know whether it's good or bad until you see what the inflation number is, or you have an idea of what your expenses are. Now, your nominal GDP is just a straight flat calculation. It hasn't have the nuances of a real calculation. Okay, so real GDP, that considers your inflation. So it doesn't just look at how prices have gone up or how your economy has grown. It looks at how it's done it. Okay, so in this case, our nominal GDP would be 3.6 million plus 1 million plus 1.5 million. Okay, so I'm just going to add those together and we get a total economy worth 6.1 million Rand. Okay, so that is our nominal GDP for year one in this economy where we only produce these three products. Okay, now let's look at what your next type of question could be. Okay, so then of course you will be asked to calculate exactly the same thing, but for year two. Okay, remember that of course we know that inflation is not yet being calculated. But by the third question, so I'm going to we're going to have to work out the second year as well. Okay, so we're going to do exactly the same thing. All of these calculations were for year one. So we're going to do the same calculation for year two. And so we're going to say 650 multiplied by 3,600. I know it's laborious, but this is how we have to work out what your nominal GDP is. Okay, and you need both years in order to calculate a real GDP. And I'm going to show you why that is important now. Okay, multiply by 3,600, and you get 234. Okay, goodness. Okay, so immediately you can see that on face value, it looks like our solar panel industry has jumped significantly, growing by nearly 100%. Okay, maybe less than that, say 70%. Okay, so that looks fantastic. But we also note that while production increased, price also went up. Now, if your price is inflating, that is not a measure of economic growth. Okay, which is why we have to have 2 years. And I'm going to show you now the significance of this, and we're going to walk you through it. Okay, so 45,000 bags is what we produced of wheat in year 2, and we're going to multiply that by 28. Okay, and that would give us GDP for that industry or contribution for that industry.
1,260,000.
Oh, girl, I so appreciate you. One, brilliant. Okay, and then of course, our final calculation for scooters, and we sell these at 19,500 each. Goodness. Okay, so again, overall, we see that there is growth. But now, is that growth in price? Are we just gouging our customers, or did we actually produce more? Did the quality improve? Okay, and then we do this quick calculation, and we get 4.8 million. Okay. Goodness. Now that is a substantial jump in GDP. Okay, we can see already because each industry has contributed significantly more in year 2. So we see overall we have moved to 8,475. Too many zeros. Although that would be nice. Okay, so from year 1 to year 2, we've seen a significant jump in GDP. But we've also noted, of course, the difference in price, and the fact that production has gone up does show us that we've had economic growth. We just want to see how much of it was actually related to price and how much was actually related to us improving our production capability. So the next question you would be asked is question 3, okay? And I'm just going to pop this in here. This would be worth, I think I do have sort of a mark allocation here as well. So each of these calculations would be worth about 3 marks. You can see it's 3 separate calculations. Very important to sort of show me your steps so that I can see, even if something goes wrong, what happened so that we can correct it in the future. Okay, so the next thing you would be asked after calculating the nominal GDPs for year 1 and year 2 would be to please calculate the real GDP for year 2 using year 1 prices. Okay, so this is how we are sort of creating a ceteris paribus scenario here because we are eliminating price as a factor by using the previous year's information. Okay, so now we're going to do this calculation here just very quickly. Okay, so we are now simply going to take the information from just not get myself confused here. We're going to take the production capacity from year 2 because that was the actual improvement in the number of solar panels we could produce. But we're going to base it on the previous year's prices. Okay, and we're going to do this throughout. Okay, so we're going to maintain our production capacity, but pretend the pricing did not go up. Because by doing this, we are eliminating inflation from our calculation, that increase in price. And we are saying the reason that our economy grew and our overall GDP number rose is not because of price increases, but pure production capacity increases. Okay, so now we're going to calculate this one. Okay, so here we're at 1950. Okay, and our final one.
I can't see the space that you're working with.
You can't. Wait, hold on. Let me check here. What's going on? Oh, I see. That's weird. Okay, hold on. Let me. Okay. I hope that helps a little bit. Can you zoom on your side? Let me see.
Oh, yeah, I can.
Cool. This is actually, I'm just trying out some new things, trying to make it a little bit more interactive, a little bit more fun. And we can actually get some practice doing this maths together in a safe space. Okay, six. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so now we have calculated the real GDP. Okay, so all we have to do is add these beautiful numbers together. Okay, so our real improvement was 6675. Okay, so this is why this calculation is important. Okay, obviously, a lot of countries would like you to focus on their nominal GDP. The worse off the country is, the worse their inflation numbers would be, which means that their prices would be higher. So that would inflate their GDP numbers. Okay, so when you look at countries that are currently boasting higher economic growth than us in Africa, for example, like Rwanda is boasting a 6.5% um, economic growth level, which is substantial. Okay, but now when we go and take a look at how their calculations are done, what are we going to find? Okay, so of course, it's a very impressive country, but they do have some inflation issues. Okay, because obviously, as their employment increases, you'll find in macroeconomics, we'll touch on this a little bit later on this in the semester. But as a government, your big problem is that if you employ more people to grow your economy, you obviously cause yourself a bit of an inflation problem because now more people are entering the market and can compete for the goods that you are producing. So the prices go up. So that could look very good for your country if you just have people looking at your nominal GDP in year 2000, okay, or let's say 2025, you were only doing 6.1 million. But a year later, you've grown to 8.4 million. Now, what this figure over here tells us, the 6.675 million, that is the real growth of the country. Their actual growth came from their production capacity increases. So there, of course, when you look at a comparison between nominal GDP, you'll see a very inflated amount, but that's because it has literally included inflation. Hey, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Hey, great. Okay, now we move on. Okay, so I'm just going to pop this in as a little green sticky note as well. Okay, so here, when we're calculating real GDP, you want to use year two quantities and year one prices. So we can, of course, do this for anything. So if you want to get a real representation, of course, okay, so
Hey, you
this
used the wrong number for the third calculation. It's 250, not 200.
250. Oh,
Yeah, I was
he's
wondering
such
why
a
my
clever
calculation was
girl.
wrong. Oh my
That
gosh.
you beat me to it. I am so impressed. That very well done. Thank you. Okay, so 250 multiplied by that's why it didn't experience much growth. We didn't give
Yeah.
it any. Okay, so this is 4.5. That's much better. There we go. Okay, so that means that we have to add, I swear, my brain has already experiencing Easter. To keep trying to convince it to come back. Okay, so here we go. That's better. Okay, so now our representation of their economy is to say you didn't quite achieve that level of growth, but you did get 7 million, which is
Yeah.
still a substantial increase. Okay, so this is the country that you'd look and investing in. Now, you'll note that obviously people like to hide a lot of things in these calculations. Now, we've seen this in real time. In the last few years, the American federal government, or their Fed, has changed their inflation calculations to make their inflation not look as bad as it is. And all of their policies are now based on this new calculation of inflation. But very few people noticed because people look at we see the CPI numbers, we see the GDP numbers, and people are like, oh, okay, that's lovely. If it's positive, it's going up. If it's negative, it's coming down. We want negative inflation if we can get it, and we want positive growth. But if they change the calculations, if you don't know as an economist, if you don't know how those calculations are derived, then you can also be sustainable or sus susceptible, that's the word, to this narrative. Okay, so you can make inflation look not as bad as it is, and then build whole economic policies based on this new calculation just because no one knows enough to fight against it. Okay, so we're going to comment briefly on whether the economy has experienced real economic growth. So at this point, you are just going to be summarizing what you see in your calculations. Okay, so you'll be seeing that, of course, you started with sort of slower production levels. Then you saw an increase in production overall. This is obviously indicated by an improvement in technology. There was additional productive capacity that entered. We had some sort of productivity increase because everyone became patriotic. It could be any of these things that have contributed to real economic growth. Okay, and I think that is let me just make sure here. Okay, then they wanted you to define GDP at factor costs. Okay, so this is quite a tricky one. Let me just see how they wanted us to look at that. There it is. Okay, so you have to calculate it, then you have to look at GDP. Now define GDP at factor costs. Ah, here it is. Okay, so a whole new section of the work. So here's where it gets tricky, and I just want to give this to you guys as well, which is just a summary of how we calculate these different measures. Here we go. Okay, so let's just make a new little section here. Okay, so this is how the different ways that we calculate GDP. Now, we always use a tracking mechanism based on one of the flows. So here you can see when we're using factor costs, we are looking at production. When we're looking at basic prices, factor costs, we're looking at the income of the people who are earning. With basic prices, we're looking at how much did the production cost us. And at market prices, we're looking at expenses. So because we can only track GDP over a period of time, we have to use these measures. Now, in order to ensure accuracy and comparability across the global economy, we have these standard mechanisms for accounting. So here, okay, I'm just going to give you the example of what your question could look like. Okay, so here I'm just going to. Okay, so here I'm just going to pop this in. Okay, so here you have what they will typically give you is a table or a series of results. Okay, so here they're telling you GDP at market price. So now you can at least see here, according to your formulae. I don't know. Let me just check how extensive. I will send you the formula sheet so that you can do a comparison as to what you would need to memorize and what would be provided to you. Because you can lean quite heavily on the formula sheet, and you can even use the formula sheet to derive the formulae that we don't provide you. Okay, so let's take a quick look at how this would sort of work out. Okay, so here I'm just going to pop this. Okay, into something that allows me to do copy and paste. Okay, so we're told that the primary income received from the rest of the world is 180 billion. Okay, the primary income paid to the rest of the world is 240 billion. Now you can see that when we are looking at how much we pay to the world, okay, there are specific calculations there. Okay, these would be considered, let me actually get you a one that's a little bit closer to that representation of a table. Okay, so here we have, okay, so they've got national statistics. Okay, and let me just see, why is everything freezing on me? Hmm. Sorry, guys. I don't know why my computer is being hijacked for this moment. Okay, but anyway, okay, I think it's because I'm trying to share. Okay, so then they ask you to calculate the country's gross national income. Okay, so something very important I just want to point out here, okay, is that you will notice that there is gross national, um, say income. Okay, there are only a few variations of this. There is net domestic, and this will be any of your flows. It could be production or expenses or income. Okay, so gross and net, okay, those two work together. National and domestic, they work in opposition. And then income, production, and expense, they work. Okay, so now based on these measures, these three different variables, wish I could mark them separately. Don't know if it would do this. Nope, it won't. Okay, so based on these different variables, you have all of the calculations you could have. Okay, so you have gross, net, domestic, national. So gross obviously means that including there's no depreciation considered. Net means depreciation is considered. National means everything produced by citizens of your country. Domestic means everything produced, earned, or spent on within the boundaries of your country. And then, of course, you've got income, production, and expense, which are your three economic flows. Now, between those, you can be asked to calculate pretty much anything. Now, I want to see if I can get you a summary. This thing will just work. Okay. Of what these different things are you're expected to know. Okay, so if we're looking at gross national income, for example, okay, so you'll know that you have, when we talk about net primary income from the rest of the world, it means that we are receiving income from other people for our citizens. Okay. When we are paying an income, it means that we are paying people who don't necessarily have citizenship here in our country. Okay, so now if I look at gross national income. Okay, in order to calculate gross national income from these figures. Now, the reason I mention this is because each of them I'll give you a formula sheet as well, but each of these are so related that you can use one to calculate another. So here, based on our first box of figures, we get asked to please calculate the GNI. Okay, so this is what we are asked to calculate. Okay, now the GNI is simply GDP at market prices plus net primary income. Okay. Now, when we say net primary income, obviously that means that we have to calculate how much money is leaving our country and how much money is coming in. So we have to work out so we've got to take the difference between this amount. So we've got GDP at market prices, and it's plus net primary income. Okay. What is net primary income? It's obviously the difference between the primary income received from the rest of the world and the primary income paid to the rest of the world. Okay, so we are going to say that it is 180 minus 240 billion. And that leaves us with negative 60 billion rand. Then we've already been given, okay, we've already been given our GDP at market prices. That looks better. So we simply substitute this in back into the same formula. GDP at market prices was 4.2 billion and net primary income is a negative 60 billion. Okay, so we end up with 4,100. Oh, my goodness. 4,140 billion. Okay. Now, the tricky thing about this is, despite the fact that there are limited variations, okay, so like I said, you've always got, I'm going to put them here. Okay, so you've got gross or you've got net. You also have domestic versus national. And then finally, your last variation, like we said, is your three flows. Now, if you get given any of this information, you need to be able to essentially calculate by withdrawing and adding different values. You need to be able to calculate your net national income, your gross national production, your gross domestic production. You need to know what to add in and what to remove. So I'm going to give you another summary just to consolidate your knowledge, but I've also posted, this is all of your lecture slides for Learning Unit 5. So I'd encourage you, I've given you a few worked examples as well, so you can just see the different variations of how they can ask it. So in the exam, the tricky part really becomes, do you know the formula they are expecting you to apply? Okay, then next we could be asked to differentiate between the GDP at current prices and GDP at constant prices. Okay, so GDP at current prices is your nominal GDP, and at constant prices, that's your real GDP. So we know that because current would obviously be calculated on a nominal basis, and your constant prices would be calculated based on a base year. Okay, so let's just. Okay, so now when we are doing a calculation between two different percentages that have already been worked out for us, we would have to say, do they ask you to explain or to calculate? So, differentiate between GDP and current. Oh, yes. Okay. So that would actually be your explanation. Is this that the nominal GDP would have increased compared to last year, but the real GDP, the actual growth in your economy, was only 2.5%. Okay, so this is the more accurate figure, the real GDP aspect. Okay, and then using the growth information, comment on whether the country experienced real economic growth. Okay, I would encourage you to also, add in little things. Like there are things that we don't may not mention, but there's the base effect. Okay, so in the same way that if you're Coca-Cola and your market increases by 1% versus if you are, I don't know, what's it, Fizzy, that, the new company that makes rip-off cool drinks, and I think they just been sold today for in a $1 billion deal, or a few $1 billion, billion rand. So if that company were to grow 2%, it would really not mean anything. But for Coca-Cola to, yes, it is, Nicole. You're so right. Okay, but look, they're a very old company as well. They've had their ups and downs. So when a company like Pepsi says they've experienced a 5% growth, we'd be like, oh, okay, that's pretty impressive. It's a pretty well-known brand. But Coke couldn't pull off the same thing because everybody already knows Coke. And Coke has that incredible, it's got no taste memory, so you can't actually remember how Coke tastes after you've consumed it. That was one of the things Warren Buffett loved about it. And that's why you'll keep drinking more and more Coke. You don't actually have you don't have a limit that you reach. You don't actually become saturated until you're physically unable to digest more Coke. Okay, then of course you get asked to explain the difference between GNI and NNI. Okay, well, that is simply put here already. Okay, so these are the variations that you could have. Okay, so you're either these specific things. Also, I think I did make you a little diagram in one of our first lectures here. Um, okay, I do encourage you. Here it is. Okay, so in this crazy explanation, which I'm going to pop down here. Okay, so here is all of these little things. Now, of course, GDP is the one that we matter or that we are most concerned with because that is the one that shows us, okay, without being able to remove depreciation, which is the gross part, only looking at what we domestically, as in within the boundaries of our economy, so, or the boundaries of our country. So it doesn't matter if we have people who are expats that are working here. If they are contributing to our domestic production, then they're included in the figure. Okay, so of course, this is the actual breakdown. So if you get asked to point out a difference between gross and net, you're simply looking at depreciation. Domestic is obviously boundaries, physical boundaries of your country, whereas national is based on citizenship. And then you've got your three flows. Okay, so that should pretty much sew up the questions you could be asked around this. Okay, so just to do one final wrap up before we move on. So each of these three methods, the production methods, there is one diagram I am looking for that just summarizes. There it is. Okay. Okay, just to further illustrate this point. Okay, so we're simply looking at production. If you are ever encounter GDP at any of these sort of prices, so if it's at market prices, it means it is looking at expenses. That means in order to get to basic prices, you need to either you need to add in product subsidies and remove product taxes. If you're going further back from basic prices, which looks at production, okay, and then you have to add in your production subsidies and remove your production taxes. If you're looking at factor costs, you're essentially looking at what each person was paid when they added value to the product, okay, as it went through the supply chain. So these are the things you essentially need to know. Like I said, it can get tricky in that they can ask you in a number of different ways. This is the same type of question, believe it or not. Okay, so here you were asked to calculate nominal GDP. Okay, so this is the start of Learning Unit 5, where we ask you to calculate and be able to measure GDP. But also, you need to be able to convert it to GDP using the expenses model, using production costs or income. Obviously, they all should be equal. Okay, the reason that we use multiple different calculations is so that it just eliminates the possibility of faults. Because you guys, of course, know that based on our original flow, based on the oh, that's why. Okay, so based on the original diagrams that we looked at, when you were looking at your flows through the economy, the reason that we use all these different measures is to make sure that we are one, not double counting, and two, not discounting something. So if we know, because this is an economic flow, and we assume that we can calculate any leakages, it means that this should all speak to one another. We do have certain things that of course, you can see here production taxes, product taxes. These are government interventions. And because of that, we consider those a leakage from this economic flow. So, in order to get an accurate representation at each level through our economy, we have to remove the government intervention to get a true reflection of what's happening in that industry. Okay, and so based on that, we can do accurate comparisons between different countries and even different unions. We also base a lot of our economic policy on these findings. Because for example, if we were to find that, okay, this if we were to find that our scooters are being produced substantially better than other people's scooters, okay, we the price has risen at a fair amount and we are now producing more. But if we were to add in a production subsidy, for example, if the government was to get involved and say, we'd actually like you to keep your prices a little bit lower while continuing to grow your production capacity in order to leverage your production capacity and give you a competitive advantage. See, the reason that these government interventions are so important is because, like we looked at in the foreign sector, they are protectionist as well. When the government provides you with subsidies, they're saying we want your product to be competitive internationally. So we're going to assist you in keeping your prices low. When they're looking at product taxes, that is typically done when when a country is trying to either support or discourage a certain production. Now, remember, we, for example, have high tax on products like that attract sin taxes. The reason for that is literally because the government doesn't want us to smoke and drink. So they impact right here just after the production factors. So you can see here at basic prices, you're only looking at like income. So we don't want to impact production and income directly. We want to discourage purchases. That's why you would attract either a product tax or product subsidies. When the government wants to encourage us to buy something, of course, we receive a subsidy. Even a company can provide you with a subsidy in order to sort of push a certain product. So you're just looking at where you are in the production cycle and what information you've been provided with. And then you sort of work from there. Okay. Also, please, if you get stuck, do consider your formula sheet. You won't go wrong. Let me just show you what it used to look like. Okay, just so that you can get an idea for when you are preparing as well. Okay, so this is what your formula sheet used to look like. This is an older version of it, of course. The details haven't changed very much, so it should be quite similar. So you remember we covered the monetary sector. Now this is where you'll start to see what I mean when I say that the formula sheet can provide you, or at least give you the information or the formulae that you can derive from other formulae. So here you've got your nominal GDP. So just like we looked at, you've got real GDP. If you get stuck, please just check your formula sheet. I'm sure you'll find the answers there. Here is every variation we've discussed. Like I said, you've got all of your gross figures. There's your net, all your domestic or national, and then all of your different variations. Of course, if it ends in I, it means it's income. If it ends in P, it's product. And if it ends in E, it's expenditure. Okay, here is every variation. See, here's how we calculated GNI or GNP. We took GDP, we added foreign income, and we subtracted foreign payment. So just looking at this formula sheet, even if you are not sure what you're supposed to do, by just understanding those three separate variables, gross, domestic, or national, and one of the flows, you can derive what you need to do. Because you can start with GNP, and then if they ask you to calculate gross national income, you know that GNP and GNI are the same thing. So maybe you just need to, move your GDP into GNP, and here's the formula for it. See, so you just need to have a grasp of what each of those things mean and just be able to manipulate those formulae. Okay, next we're going to be moving on to the Keynesian models, where we look at the government and foreign sector in a little bit more detail. We're going to be looking at the multiplier. They don't provide you with a lot of different formulae, just the most important ones. And you can see that the reason I wanted to spend a little bit of extra time on this learning unit is because it is quite formula heavy. But you don't have to memorize everything. You simply need to have a basic understanding, and I'm quite confident you can manipulate this formula sheet to get the variables you need. Okay. Oh my goodness, I've run out of time already. Do you guys have any questions? I'm going to post this formula sheet. I'll send it out as an announcement tomorrow morning, just so that you guys can also start, you can even just use it to start creating your notes by using the information you're pretty sure you're going to get in the exam anyway. So I'll make sure that you've got that. And then, of course, you've got access to all your learning units, your lecture slides. And then if you need any additional support, you just let me know. We'll be moving on to income determination and the simple Keynesian model in next week's lectures. Oh, yes. Yes, Nicholas.
Hi, good evening, Moeen.
Good evening.
I've joined a bit late, sorry, man. I just wanted to ask the whiteboard that you shared now,
Yes.
will it be available in the recording as we had to navigate to another window to access it? So when we're looking at the recording, will it take us to what you have showed us? Because you summed it up so nicely in that whiteboard. So I just wanted to know if we are going to look at the recording, will it navigate as you have explained it, or how will it? Because I like to go
Okay.
back on the recording.
Of
Um,
course. Okay, I think what I will do here is you should have access to the recording, but I'm going to copy this link and drop it in our chat so that, oh goodness, that's not the one. Let me just see if I can get this link.
I
Um,
also have like a relevant question though. Where can I access the past question papers in preparation for the exams?
Okay, so past question papers you'll generally find in your My Emirates. There you have a, let me just see here. Apply. Oh, sorry, hon, I'll be right with you. Okay, it is, let me just drop this in the chat. Okay, okay, so there is the whiteboard that we've used for the evening. Okay, so Nicholas, so if you just log back into our chat for the meeting, you should be able to access the whiteboard whenever you do revision. Okay, and then Nicole, with your either. Okay, so then this is, if you have any issues accessing it, please let me know and I will see what I can do. I'm also going to just keep track of that whiteboard so that I know that we don't lose it. Okay, and then in my Emirates, let's see if I get lucky and they let me in. Okay, under My Emirates, you've got your My Academics section. Let's see. Okay. You've got My Academics, and then you should have a button to your library. Now, your library should have, here we go, My Library. It's working. Okay, so here we have past papers.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, so I will have to tell you as well, Hannah, that you won't find any memos. Okay, so hold on, let me just stop recording myself here quickly. Just to be safe. Stop recording. Okay. Okay, so you won't find any memos online.